Welcome to my keybinds video. I would just like to preface that this is all just my personal preference. I'm not telling anyone they should use these binds or that they are better in any way. I've just been asked a few times how I would make the game feel more similar to other shooters and what I use. And also what binds I use for flying helicopters with a controller. So I thought I would make a video. Without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, I am really going to regret this, aren't I? I'm going to forget something. I know I am. But we're going to reset all of our binds. Right, everything back to default. So we're going to go over all of the binds, including the modded binds that we use for the WCS servers. We've got the WCS binds, the ACE binds, and the RHS binds. So there's a couple little changes we're going to make in there as well, which we'll get to later down the line. But we're going to go through each tab one by one, and I'm going to show you everything that I change with my current binds. So let's have a look. I'm going to go through these. I'm going to go through these one by one because just so I don't miss any. But off of this list here, the only thing I change is I use H for something else. You're going to see later down the line. So I changed that to Y. Just for getting rid of the hints. I don't have them so they pop up anyway. But I just have that changed because it makes a UI sound when you press H, even if you don't have the hints showing up. So I move that to something else so I don't get those UI clicking sounds every time I'm pressing H. Objectives, nothing here. We change focus. Here we go. So focus, I changed this from right click because I use hold to aim. So we're gonna get through that as well. I changed the focus to one of my mouse thumb buttons, mouse number 5. So I have that set there, hold, and then press to focus. The exact same on the vehicle and unarmed as well. And free look, we keep that the same. Toggling perspective we don't use. I usually play in just first person servers anyway, so I keep that on enter. If you're somebody that does switch between first and third person more often, maybe you want that something a little bit easier to reach. Radio and VoIP is another one. I just keep these all completely vanilla. But so that's all we're going to change on this page. Onto the equipment tab, we keep these the same on the top few. And the first one we are going to change is at the bottom of the list where you have the individual binds. So binoculars, I don't use B because I switch B for the fire rate switch because that's what I use in a lot of other games, Escape from Tarkov and stuff like that. So I use the binoculars on H. It's another one that's really easy to reach with my thumb. So I move that onto H. And then the ADS is by default on toggle. So I get rid of the toggle bind and I put it on hold. So I'm holding to aim. Everything else on this list, keep as is. Next up, we've got the character binds. I don't know if I change anything on here. Yes, we changed crouch actually. So everything is kept as default on the top of it. And at the bottom, we change the crouch or stand to C from X, and we change the prone from Z to X. Personal preference, I just prefer X. That's how I've always used. It's what I've always used. And I actually changed the prone, or I changed the prone from just proning to prone or stand, so I can use X for getting up as well. Also, if I am prone. So for the vehicle tab, I don't think I change anything on here at all. I think it's all kept as default. Yeah, nothing on the vehicle tab. The helicopter one we're going to circle back to. I'll go through my helicopter binds because I actually use a controller, but I'll give you both the controller binds that I use and also the keyboard and mouse one. So we'll get onto the helicopter one later. I'll put a chapter in the video for anyone that wants to skip towards it. Okay, the weapon tab. The main things we change for the weapon tab is cycle fire modes. We use V. We removed the binocular one from B to H, so that frees up the cycle fire mode to B. And then I also have the select grenade launcher as holding B as well. So that's what I use for that. Everything else. Here we go. This one's actually quite important. We have lower weapon, raise weapon, and low ready. And by default, low ready is set to shift. and low ready is this movement here, is where you have the weapon half lowered, not completely lowered where it's on safety and it's, you know, you're standing off guard, but it's yeah, it's the half load that at least you can still move around pretty quick. But the problem with it being on shift is if you're running, you come into contact, and like, you know, you come around, you haven't got time to aim, and you just need to shoot. Like your weapon's lowered. Like it can just be like, I'm pressing right click there to aim, and it's just like, sometimes you just get moments where your weapon's just not firing where you want it to be firing, and it just stays down because you're sprinting around and stuff like that. So in CQB it can be a little bit rough. So what I do to change that is I keep the lower, like the full lower weapon on double tap control, and then I put the low ready on just one press of control, and then the raise weapon bind I remove, because I don't need that. I don't need the raise weapon bind because I can simply use the ADS to raise my weapon. So when I'm moving around like this, if I'm in a combat stance and I don't want to, like, I want to save a bit of stamina, I want to move a little bit faster, I just tap control once to lower, and then I double tap it to fully lower. And then even when it's in that low ready stance, if I'm sprinting and I need to aim, it's like, I'm not accidentally going into the low ready stance. You know, if I'm in this stance and then I press shift, I'm not accidentally lowering my weapon, it's just ready to go all the times, and I can fire very quickly coming out of there, rather than being stuck in the low ready and having to left click twice to get out of it, you know what I mean? So back to the weapon tab. The rest weapon and the bipod I change from C, because I use C for crouch, so I change that to V. So toggling the bipod is holding V, and then mounting it onto a surface is tapping V. And the other thing we change on here is, of course, we want to use hold to aim rather than toggle. And then everything else on here, I believe, is not default. The switch weapon optics we change to left control, and this one doesn't affect the low ready button, because whenever you're using it, you're going to be aiming down sights. So that is the bind for switching optics. Just a single one press, left control, easy to hit with the pinky, and with those binds done, I just find it considerably easier. You know, if you're in a CQB environment, just being able to really quickly aim down sight and be very snappy with it, you know, or like you get shot in the back rather than just having to tap, to toggle it with one click. It's just, I just feel it's much more responsive if you're aiming exactly when you're pressing the right click rather than waiting for it to release. You know what I mean? You're ADSing on the press. It's how I play on all shooter games. I always just hold the aim rather than toggle. Of course it is a personal preference, but this video is about my preference. Next up we got the turret binds. Now this is kind of an interesting one. With the turrets, I actually keep the ADS on toggle. And the reason I do that is when you're in a vehicle, most of the time, like quite often when you're in a vehicle, you just want to be staying in ADS, especially if, like, when you're in the modded vehicles with high zoomed optics. Often you're sitting holding an angle for a long amount of time, and there's just many other things that you might want to be doing rather than just holding right click the entire time. So with with turret optics, I actually just keep it to toggle. I find it it's just much more comfortable for me. Obviously you can use hold if you'd like to, but yeah, for turrets I do have it on toggle only. Everything else default. As for the WCS binds, the only thing I switch here is the cycle fire mode. I just put that to the same as my FPS weapon, so I don't have to remember left shift V. So I put that to B. That's the changing the cycling the fire modes for the modded vehicles, like the modern ground vehicles and rocket helicopters and stuff like that. You can change like the amount of rockets fired in a salvo or things like that. Everything else on here I keep as default, I believe. The only thing I do change here is the activate lock on the handheld launchers, or launchers in general. So you have like the Igla or the Stinger locking onto helicopters. Because we've changed our cycle optics bind to left control, it conflicts with this one and means that the Iglas won't log on. So what I changed this to I changed this to, it's like I have a keybind in between Shift and Z, which I use for the locking on. I changed the bind to that. But you could also use Z, because we've got Z freed up from other binds, so you could also use that as well. So for the lock on, I switched to that bind that I've got between. It's like a little like slash symbol between Shift and Z on my keyboard. But everything else on the WCS binds, I keep default. Same with the Ace binds, I keep that default. Control X for dropping soldiers when you're carrying them, when you're carrying like injured soldiers. And the RHS binds, the only thing I change is the radial menu. I put this to Z. It's by default on this bind here. I like to have it just a little bit easier to hand. What this is the radial menu for the modded gear, so you can have access to your helmet and your glasses and any tactical devices. So I've got my laser here. You can see all of the modes for the laser and any configuration stuff that has. And another key thing that you use this bind for is when you have a rangefinder on you in the modded servers that have RHS. It's when you have a rangefinder on you and you have a specific rank, is you ADS with the rangefinder on you, and then you press that wheel and you've got the rangefinder here, and you can call in bombing runs. When you have the rank and the supplies to do so, you can call in bombing runs and supply crates. So that's the main things I use this wheel for. So I use that on Z. So as for the rest of the RHS binds, the other things I change is the toggle light device. So like having like a laser on your weapon or your helmet, I have that. It says L, but I have that on my mouse. I have that on my mouse has 4 thumb buttons, 2 on the left and 2 on the right. I use it on one of the ones to the right. I just have it macroed so it presses L. So I have that set for L for toggling them on or off as L, cycling through the device modes, double tap L, and momentarily like hold to turn on. And the final thing I change is using the laser rangefinder. I change that from C just because it conflicts with our crouch. So when you keep that bound to C, it means whilst you're ADS like this, I am tapping C, and it does not let me crouch, so you can only crouch whilst on ADS, which obviously isn't good when you are in combat. So to free up, I move that bind to something else, just something like it's not something you use very often, so I use it like across my keyboard with the comma symbol. Move it to there, and then that frees up C, so now whilst I'm ADS, I can crouch and uncrouch using C. But that's it for the infantry stuff. Let's go hop in a helicopter, and I'm going to go through some of the controller binds that I use in a helicopter. Okay, let's hop into this absolutely stunning Apache helicopter and go through some of the heli binds that I use on a controller. Earplugs in so we can actually hear ourselves talk. But as for keyboard and mouse binds in a helicopter, the only thing I change when using keyboard and mouse is I do fly with mouse, by the way. I don't just use the keyboard, but this will apply to anybody if you're flying just keyboard or keyboard and mouse. The only thing I change is I find it a little bit unintuitive to use shift and control for the collective up and down. It doesn't feel that intuitive to me. I'm like, if I'm driving vehicles, like I think of it like how driving a car, using the shift for the full throttle in the cars, and then using spacebar for the handbrake. So I changed the collective down from left control to spacebar. So it's shift to go up, space to go down, and then of course that conflicts with our wheel brakes. You don't want to be turning your wheel brakes on and off every time you're lowering the collective if you're flying like an MI8 or anything with wheels. So I change the wheel brakes, I swap it around to control. But as for keyboard binds, that is literally all I change. So everything else is default, but shift to go up and it's spacebar to go down. And I just think that's a lot more comfortable on my hand when I'm flying with a keyboard and mouse. So that's the binds that I use if I haven't got a controller plugged in. Okay, but as for controller, I use very different to the default binds. The default binds has it so you use your collective and your anti-torque on the left stick and your cyclic on the right stick. But I really don't like that. I like being able to free look a bit easier on controller. So I use collective up and down. I use X and A, right? Or if you're on PlayStation, that is square and X. And then for the anti-torque left and right, the rear rotor rudder, I use the triggers, left trigger and right trigger. So they're on an axis as well, which means you can control them quite nicely with left and right trigger. I find the collective up and down is a lot less, it's a lot less sensitive, so you don't really need it to be on an axis. For the cyclic, I use everything on the left stick, so forward, up, down, left and right. So that's our pitch movements. And then as for the wheel brakes, and so this is like quite interesting because this is going to be, this is why I kind of like said that this video is more towards just keyboard players, even for the helicopter controls. A lot of the keyboard things I unbind so I don't accidentally press them, because by default it's like left stick down plus Y to turn the engine off. So like sometimes you'll be pulling up and then trying to do something like popping flares or something like that in the helicopter. So I kind of unbind all of these, and when I want to use the wheel brakes, I just reach over to my controller. I reach over to my keyboard, sorry. So all of these things here, I unbind because I simply just use the keyboard for them. The toggle auto hover, I keep that on left stick pressed down, and then the taxi lights and landing lights, again I unbind because I just use them from the cockpit view. I will just look around and turn on the lights this way. The only other thing I change on controller for flying, like I said, I like to unbind things that get in the way. So I go down to the vehicle one. I unbind like eject and exit vehicle and things like that, just so I don't accidentally press them. And then what I do bind is in the common you have the general like use key, the perform action key. I change this. This is X by default. And I change this to Y. So when I'm pressing X to go collective up, if I happen to be hovering over like an open door like this, or like if I happen to be hovering over one of the prompts, like switch seat to gunner, I don't accidentally press them whilst I'm pressing X for collective up. And if I'm free looking around, looking outside for troops or anything like that, I don't accidentally press them. So I have that changed to Y. So then if I do want to press them, I'm not accidentally doing it, you know what I mean? I'm just pressing Y for it. And finally, for modded helicopters, and for soon in 1.3 they're going to be the rocket helicopters as well, you need the fire key, right? So they need the fire weapon key for the helicopters, and that comes under the turret. That comes under the turret binds. So you have turret fire, and I changed this from right trigger to right bumper. So of course when I'm using the anti-torque, it's not accidentally firing weapons off. So I use that on right bumper. And if you are flying in modded helicopters, in the WCS servers that have flares, I have the flares assigned to left bumper. By default, I think they are, yeah, it's by default it's left stick and Y, and I changed that to left bumper. Nice and easy, you can react to it very fast. So that's why I put it there. Right, something that's a bit of a post edit because I forgot to include it in my original recording, was under the WCS binds for helicopters. Well, it's just under the general WCS binds. There's 3 settings that I change for helicopters, and that is changing weapon. I change that to left on the D-pad. Cycling fire modes, I have that as down on the D-pad. And then toggling the vehicle camera, I have that as up on the D-pad. And the vehicle camera, all that is it focuses, it centers the crosshair. So no matter what vehicle you're in, it just centers the crosshair a bit, and then it disables the free look when you're in this mode as well. So you can be looking around anywhere, and then you just toggle that camera, and you're just doing back in your sights. It's quite a nice one to have. Of course, because you've got these binds in under the D-pad, you're gonna want to disable the D-pad binding. So if you go under your equipment, you're gonna want to disable the bind for inventory, and there's a couple others as well. You just want to check through your binds, and the ones that are assigned to the D-pad that are going to interrupt you whilst you're flying, you're just going to want to unbind those ones. But that is it for this video. If this helped you in any way at all with sorting out your binds, or if you have any like little tricks yourself that you use in the keybinds, be sure to let me know in the comments below. And of course, stick around for more Arma Reforger content. I'll see you in the next one.